Welcome everybody to another episode of RM Sotheby's Car Show. This week we're going to be speaking to Amy Shaw, automotive photographer. Well, not just automotive. Well, hang on, we'll talk about that. In this context, we're talking about cars. And actually, first off, Amy, you and I essentially now have the same surname. It's just a different spelling. Slightly different spelling.
I when I saw your surname, I thought, another Haynes. I can now say another Haynes. Yeah.
An Haynes. See, anyone, if I give my name, people will instinctively spell it Haines. Mm-hmm. So then normally I have to put them right. Then so Haynes. Then when I say my name is Haynes, because I've worked pretty much all my life in the motor industry, they go, "Oh, do you make the car manuals?" And I go, "No, I don't make the car manuals." But you're Haynes, aren't you?
That's it. Yeah.
That's even rarer. That's rare.
Yeah. Apparently, yeah. So I went from Shaw, which is still my business name, of it's not SHAW, it's SHORE, to just spelling it's HAYNES. So I don't actually know many. I've met one other Haynes that's spelled, apart from the obvious kind of family ties currently. One stranger Haynes spelled my way, but there's not very many of us. So and it's nice to meet another Haynes generally, nearly spelled the same.
But professionally, you're going to stay Amy Shaw.
Yes, this was a really quite difficult decision actually, because I was thinking, because personally I've now gone to Amy Haynes, but it's really Amy Shaw that's built the 10-year. Yeah, it's Amy Shaw as the brand, and it's Amy Shaw that built the 10-year career that I've got to here. So I just feel it'd be a bit of a disservice to the Amy Shaw name if I was just like, oh, screw that now. It's Amy Haynes now. So no, it's Amy Haynes as the director of Amy Shaw Photography Limited. So okay. I can get called either, and it'll still stick.
That is a bit of a dilemma, isn't it? It's not one that us chaps really have to deal with, isn't it? Which seems a bit unfair. But, there was a discussion that if I didn't change my name at all, then I just thought I've kind of liked the idea. I like to I don't know. I've always quite liked the idea of taking a husband's name, but it's just not from I'm a definite feminist, and I wouldn't ever say like everybody should or anything like that. But I just quite like the idea of it. So it was a dilemma that I didn't quite expect when I was a teenager, thinking, oh, what shall I change my name to when I'm older, and who am I going to get married to? Because I never thought that I'd have a self-employed business that I'd have my name on the package as such. So it's a nice dilemma to have. Yeah, and it's yes, I mean and with photography, really, you can't come up with some spurious name, can you? The generic name, because and this is perhaps quite a nice way to start getting into the conversation. I think in particular, photographers are very reliant, or a big part of building the business is personal relationships, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So it's you are your brand.
Yes,
you can't get around that.
Yeah, which is a nice thing, but at the same time, it does make it difficult if I ever wanted to not step away, but maybe like slow down. Or I know some people that've got, I've been hired as a photographer for somebody else's brand for certain shoots, and I find I could still do that, but I'd find it a little bit more difficult if you're expecting Amy Shaw to show up at the shoot and then you get Amy Shaw's associate or whatever. It doesn't quite work, because especially when it comes down to something that's very artistic, and it's the way that I shoot in my eye, and like it's not really something you can often hire other people to go and do. You can hire second shooters. So when I used to be a wedding photographer, either I used to be a second shooter for somebody else, or that person would be mine, and you kind of shoot in a similar way, but only one of us would edit it, for example, and one of us would have the client relationship. So as you said, a lot of the kind of, especially when you're in an artistic role, a lot of it comes from client discussions and I want to say networking, but it's a bad way of saying it. Just the relationship that you have with those clients, and even those individual people that then move to another part of the industry, but you get to stay kind of connected to that person, and so you end up doing something else. And exactly that. So it's not something I can really hire somebody else to do, to then be like, oh, go do my photography and fan me with a fig leaf kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's, many years ago, back in the 90s, well, no, even further, I was going to say, in late 90s, I was working as a journalist at Autocar, but even before that, I worked for Caterham Cars, sort of in a salesy marketing role back then. And we were using I was working with photographers working on Caterham stuff, and I'm going back to like 1993, 1994, long time ago. I still have working relationships with some of those photographers now. And certainly a lot of when I was at Autocar, a lot of the freelance we had staff photographers, Stan Papure, who I still know, and other sort of freelancers that would get involved in doing shoots for the magazine. I still work with them now, and that is the nature of these personal relationships, isn't it, that you build in the industry?
Yeah, exactly. And it's quite lovely because especially when you're in an industry that's so small, like the car or the car industry, or even the classic car industry, even smaller, it's nice to see what become your friends, or your good acquaintances that you see for years, also develop and change their lives as well. And it's kind of nice because you have these little, like, I don't know, you just kind of see these people grow and develop in the jobs and the roles that they do. So I've got friends that kind of joined the industry a similar time to when I joined, when I was 22, something like that. And obviously when the jobs you start off as a 22-year-old and where you end up as a 32-year-old, or when you're going to end up as a 42-year-old and so on. And it's nice, I feel quite proud to know some of these people throughout their whole career as well. So that's really quite special.
Yeah. Now, and I guarantee, when you're elderly like me, you'll still be working with people that you've been working with in your 20s. So I had a read of your website, and the revealing thing about that is that you don't have a single qualification in photography.
No, not a single thing. What's funny is that my parents came and stayed at our house this last weekend while we were away. And my mum has brought over a massive black bin bag of all of my old schoolwork that she can't bear to put in the bin herself, but she doesn't want it in her house. So she's come to drop it off at mine. So just before I came on this, I was actually looking through all these things to see what things I could get rid of. And it's funny because you just kind of look through all these things I've done, like qualification, schooling things, and not a single thing. I don't think I picked up a camera until I was 13 maybe, and that was a little tiny handheld digital thing, and not like a DSLR until I was 16. So and it was just something that I never thought there'd be any point getting a qualification in something artistic, because I just thought, well, you're either good at it or you're not, aren't you? So like, I can't sing, for example. I'm not a very good painter. There's no point. If I got a qualification, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm good at it. I've just ticked the boxes to say I can do certain things, which is I think are two different things. So which is it's not, so far nobody's actually asked me for my qualifications as a photographer, which is a good thing. So now I just have to.
You know what I mean? Yeah, that's like. I said to my son who did his GCSEs recently, I said, he did all right actually, but I said, don't worry, no one's ever going to ask you for your GCSE certificate.
No, I don't think I've ever had to show anything.
I don't think I've ever showed any kind of a qualification. I might as well have told everyone I've got a first from Cambridge, and no one's ever asked me to disprove it or prove it. So you had your first DSLR at 16. So that, I suppose that's still relatively young, isn't it? So and a DSLR is quite a big purchase. So obviously by 16 you were thinking, yeah, I'm enjoying this. This is fun.
Yeah, the way I explain it to people is that I'm an impatient artist. So I just like to create things and quickly, because I can't be bothered to spend too much time on it or something. So especially when the digital cameras became much more of a thing. I think my dad had a DSLR first, and even my camera at 16, I think was something like 150 quid off eBay secondhand or something. It wasn't an expensive purchase at all. And so I just liked the fact that I could take a picture and then see it immediately on the back of a screen, and then know that I could just plug it into my computer later and have it on a screen, print it off, and then, the same day kind of thing. I did enjoy doing a lot of fine art, especially when I was a teenager and then when I went into university. But you might spend 3 days on a painting, like minimum. Sometimes longer if it wasn't doing very well. So I went to university and studied something called design crafts, where I had a mixture of glass blowing, ceramics, textiles, this kind of mixture of artistic things. And the people who are doing glass or ceramics, it'd be days before they'd be able to see their thing, which might have blown up in a kiln. And then, I quite liked doing photography, but at university I was a metalsmith. And so again, you could walk into the workshop in the morning and come out later in the afternoon with a thing that you had made. So I liked the impatientness.
You froze for a moment there.
Yeah, you froze too.
Okay. I'm not sure what happened there, but anyway, I'm sure our listeners will forgive a little freeze. It's funny. So I quite enjoyed photography, but obviously in my youth it was all film, and And I still have got my Pentax SLR film camera in a bag in the top of a cupboard and haven't had it out for years. I did a video. Tom May, a guy that does quite a lot of videography for us, we went off to do an interview with Damon Hill. And he, midway through the interview, Tom pulled out this really old SLR. It looked a little bit like a Leica, but it wasn't. It was sort of a cheaper kind of copy of a Leica, but it was old and with film. And he started, and Damon Hill said, wow, he said, let me have a look at that camera. And we all sort of were marveling over just how nicely crafted it was. And it felt very heavy as well, felt nice in the hand because it was all sort of, old school heavy metal. But anyway, what you forget is, of course, photography back then, you didn't get instant gratification, did you? Mm-hmm. So you put a roll of film in, 36 exposures, and you take your pictures, and you haven't got a clue what you've got until you sort of send it off to have it developed and get the prints back. And 9 times out of 10, you look at all the prints and go, "Oh my God, this is rubbish." But the other thing is you forget how, with digital photography, because we've all got a camera on our phones. And so a lot of us will just sort of, if you go on holiday, you might shoot 80 pictures in a day, right? And you don't even think about it. They're just going onto a like a hard drive. Because he was saying now, because film is obviously not used, is it really? I think he was saying like a roll of film is £20, is 20 quid to buy. So for 36 pictures, and then it costs that another 20 quid to get the film developed.
Yeah, it's madness, and it's so expensive. People have started, there's been a complete rise recently in people using film and film cameras in the last 5 years, but also things like cassettes. I think people are starting to play cassettes again, and vinyl is obviously massive boom. So people do use it. And I think in that case, it will start to get cheaper if it continue being as, people wanted to use it as much as they kind of are at the minute. But like personally, to shoot, for example, the Goodwood Revival on film, I'd love if I ever went just for fun one year, just pure fun, I probably would give it a go, because I think it'd be a really good laugh trying to do it. But as you said, you'd probably come away with 2 good pictures or something like that. But when you're shooting for a client, like over Revival, I might come back with 10,000 pictures from 3 days or something like that.
Oh my God.
And I usually get anywhere between, it used to be like 10% hit rate, and now it's about 30% hit rate. So there's still quite a lot of images, depending on what I'm shooting, who I'm shooting for. But that is why, like, the majority of my, the photographers that have influenced my work have all been like all film photographers. So all people that had to get those shots there and then on film. And I just think to myself, man, if you can do that then with that equipment, then I can definitely do a decent job, or try and do a decent job with this modern equipment and the ability to go, that was rubbish, I'll do that one more time. And so, like, look at some of these old, literally on my coffee table here, I've got a stack of 22 photographs that have been printed by the National Motor Museum. And they are all from different years of Le Mans. And I just look at some of these things and I think, my word, just for you to be in the right place, the right time, to think I'd better lift my camera at this point, and then to also have the settings and just think, this is going to work out, I'm sure. I just, absolute madness. And then, like, people say to me, whatever, want to shoot with lighting or, do a bit more kind of commercial stuff. And I think that's a whole different skill on its own. But for me, it was the thinking about those old photographers and the way they had nothing, and they just thought, I've just got to shoot what I can
sort
now.
Of Clementaski and those that era. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And they didn't even have a motor drive on their cameras, did they? I'm assuming. So like you've got, one shot, wind it on, get the next shot.
And just keep going and keep going, yeah.
And just keep going, yeah. Now, you were quite a long way into your photography career before you ever photographed a car, isn't that right?
Not really my career. My interest, yes, but not quite my career. So with my interest, getting a camera at 16, between the age of 16 and maybe 22, the majority of the things that I would shoot would be either like friends, just the normal stuff as you just kind of have a camera and enjoy it. And then weddings. Weddings were really where I started and got into things. So I did kind of have a basic client base, because obviously most of the time you have a one-shot client when it comes to weddings. I've been asked a couple of times if I can shoot second weddings, and I found it a bit weird and said I'm busy. So but no, otherwise they're not really repeat customers. So it's usually like their mates. So like if you shoot a good wedding, then like 3 of their mates might be like, oh, I quite liked what Amy shot, so we'll hire her as well, so on and so forth. So by the time I graduated, I'd had a few of those, and that's where I thought I was just going to not go into being a wedding photographer, but I thought I'd do wedding photography, like, I know, a handful a year as a bit of extra pocket money, and have a normal job on the, doing the day-to-day stuff. So it wasn't until, when I graduated, and then kind of shot an amazing wedding, the Goodwood Revival, for fun, and friends of mine built a replica Ferrari P4, and those 3 things basically all kind of picked up their own jobs from that, and that's where it all basically snowballed from there. So the P4 was built by an amazing company called Wilson Engineering, and they just wanted me to photograph like the bits that they had engineered before the car went off to the owner in America. I had no idea what I was doing, so I googled the night before, how do I take pictures of cars? I literally had no idea. And it comes back with all these loads of flash and loads of artificial lighting and amazing backdrops. And I was like, well, I've got a kind of a driveway with a couple of nice garage doors behind, and one camera, 2 lenses. And I just thought, if these old, at the time, it's war photographers that I was interested in, and kind of like old photojournalists. Harry Benson was one of my big inspirations. And I just thought, well, if they can photograph stuff just out and about, then I'm sure it'll be fine. And so those pictures ended up going quite viral on the internet, which really got my first kind of 2 car clients. Then I shot Revival just for fun, because my dad took me, because he was like, I know you're not that interested in cars, but I think you'd like all the people at Revival.
That's the thing with the Revival, isn't it, is that everywhere you look, there's like a feast for the eye, isn't there? Or a feast for the lens. It's like there's somebody looking amazing, or something that's a little bit crazy. So that it's such a great for a photographer. It's just like goldmine, isn't it?
Honestly, it's so beautiful, because that was definitely the thing that got me into cars, because I wasn't really interested in cars up to that point. I had a car. I did have a classic Mini, so I was obviously sort of interested in cars, but not overly. I wouldn't like be desperate to go to car shows, and I wasn't interested in the Festival of Speed particularly. So it was one of these where I was just interested in the people and the pure aesthetic nature around classic cars. And that is probably still the main interest that I have in the classic car world, just pure aesthetic. And, when you've got these cars starting in the morning and all the exhaust fumes are all being lit by the sun, you think, that's just, as a photographer, it's all of that I think the automotive world produced these amazing photographs. And again, as you said, the people, the majority of my favorite shots from any Revival I've ever shot have been certain people shots, or where there's a person with a car. I don't think there's very many pictures where I'm like, that's an amazing shot of a car that I'm really happy with. 9 times out of 10, it's all because of a person in it or a couple of people. So.
Yeah. In a minute, we'll come on to your quite distinctive style, because I think that it's quite rare, I think. I mean, I've been looking at car photography all of my career, really. And it's quite rare to be able to look at a photograph and think that you probably know who took it. And I think that's absolutely one of the qualities that you have with your work, is that I could just randomly look through an album of images, and I think Amy Shaw took that one, which is a really rare thing. But just going back a little bit, so you'd shot this Ferrari P4 and a couple of other, you'd gone to Goodwood Revival for fun. Am I right in saying that you then thought, I know, I'm going to write to Octane and see if they'll give me a job? Is that what you did?
Yes. So, because this is the thing, I'd shot this P4 and it seemed to go down well. And then I went to Revival, and that's it. And then Goodwood, I sent the picture to Goodwood on a Facebook message, and they saw it like 4 months later. But I just thought, well, I've got a few car pictures now. The only magazine that I looked at, I went to Sainsbury's and looked at the magazines and like the car magazines. I thought the only one that interests me from a non-car person and from a visual point is probably Octane. I wasn't that interested in reading about the cars. I just like to look at the pictures. So I just thought, well, at the very front of the magazines, you've got all the contact details of the editors and the picture editors and the art directors. And I just thought, I'll just email that chap there.
So back then, that would have been David Lillywhite back then, would it?
So editing? David Lillywhite, he was editing. Yeah. But then the guy that was the art director was, I can't remember his name now. This is really embarrassing. I think it's Rob somebody. he was so nice. He was so nice to me. I could probably find the email actually, because it's been floating around still. But he was so nice. So he basically said, I sent him like an email with a couple of pictures that I'd shot, because the P4 pictures ended up being published in Octane. So I had Mark Dixon came down to Leicestershire to photograph some panning and tracking shots, but the rest of the images are mine. So we both got credited, and I was so proud to have the pictures in Octane. And I was basically like, hey, I've just taken these pictures of this P4. I don't really know where to go from here. And then they were like, come down, bring us like a little portfolio, and let's have a look to see kind of what you've got. And all I had was like, car pictures or wedding pictures. So yeah, they basically went and said, go away, come back when you've got some more kind of panning and tracking shots. And I was like, yes, of course. And then I thought, I don't know what panning and tracking shots are. So then I had to Google that. And I thought, how the hell do I hang out the back of a car? Do I do it out of a window? Are you strapped in? Like, that side of things as well. I thought, I've no idea what I'm meant to be doing. So then I figured all that bit out, and I thought, this is how they do it. And it is just hanging out the back of a car with a slower shutter speed. And then, basically they said, just go and see, show us what you've got, basically. And that kind of was a real kick for me to try and learn more about what I needed to know for the rest of my career. But they were so nice to me, and I actually would always have to thank them for kind of pushing me in the right direction.
That's a great story. It's sort of, I suppose, like being a car designer, isn't it? And like writing to Pininfarina and saying, yes, I draw great cars. Can you give me a job? But so, okay, Octane sort of said, go away and do a little bit more. Did you then, how much work have you done for Octane since? Have you done much for them as it turns out?
I've done a good amount, not loads, because I do have, because the other thing is, as I was saying about style, so going back to kind of talking about my style, I know that my style doesn't fit everybody, and I'm okay with that. But also the slight problem with it is that, as you said, I'm recognized for my style, and therefore I can never really change it. I could maybe, I don't know, develop it slightly, but I could never one day just go, you know what, I don't like that, I'm gonna make it look loads different. So I just couldn't do that. So like they've hired me for a number of things, and I've got about 40 photographs left to edit on, after I finish this conversation with you, and I need to send them a shoot, which I think is going to be on the cover. I hope it's going to be a cover shoot. Mm-hmm. So, but then that would be my second cover for Octane, which the first cover I ever got was a DeLorean, and I was so proud, again, just to go into to the shop and see your picture on the cover of the magazine that I first went to say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, can you help me? And so that was for me a real achievement in my career. So I've worked with them a fair amount, not loads and loads, but a good amount. So I think they prefer blacker blacks in their pictures, and mine are not quite black, they're more grey black. So I have to tweak them slightly for print.
But it's interesting what you said about changing your style, because I once went to, there's a Picasso museum in Barcelona, mm-hmm. and it's really interesting because if you go and look at Picasso's, and I'm no expert, so there's probably going to be listeners that are going to write in Picasso experts. But anyway, it struck me that his early work was just really conventional landscapes. Mm-hmm. You just go, that's a nice forest, field, whatever. And then obviously he started doing this insane abstract cubism, whatever you call it. Yeah. It shows you what I know about art. But and that obviously became his distinctive style. But at some point, he literally just went from doing something very conventional to doing something very out there. But then I suppose also, so Picasso's work isn't for everybody, is it? I mean, you can look at some of that stuff and go, well, it's colourful, but I wouldn't want it on my wall. Yeah. But I suppose that's the thing. If he had just carried on doing landscapes, forests, fields, lakes, trees, he would have just been one of thousands of artists. So he may never have found fame, because that crazy style of his is what people were buying. So I suppose that's kind of true with you, right?
Well, I was talking to a friend of mine who's an architect, and he was basically saying that when it comes to design, and this is any design, I think it's the same with any art as well, the minute that you try to please everybody, it'll be nice, but it'll never stand out. You have to upset people, or to people to go, oh, what is that rubbish? For them to actually, half of the people will say that, half of the people are going to go, that's amazing. What, think about, look about that kind of the bravery they've done to do that. We all talk about I don't know, BMW's new grills that look weird shaped, or the Nissan Juke or something. And half of us are going to go, what is that? And the other half are going to go, that's different. That's cool. The minute that you try to please everybody, you just become very vanilla and very bland. So I think if you try to go into any form of art or design to try and please the masses, then that is a quite a dangerous thing. And I think that's why social media actually is a bit of a problem, because the minute that we try to please the masses in terms of getting as many likes or views or whatever, everything just becomes a bit bland. And I mean, it's all kind of the same things churned out from the same kind of people. And I just get bored personally, but maybe that's just me. I don't know. But I like to see something that just make me pause and look and think, that's clever. I wonder how they've done that, or why they chose to do that, or whatever. And so, it's nice to see people's work, whether that is artists, music, photographers, that make me think, that's different, that's cool, I don't understand it, but I like it. So no, you're totally right.
I mean, I think it's interesting. You said a bit earlier that you like to include people, and I think that's great, because I think working for an auction house, as I do, yes, we're selling cars, but actually a lot of people, particularly that I would say the newer, the people that have come into the market in more recent years, they're kind of buying into a lifestyle as well, aren't they? And I would say it was probably less true 50 years ago. People like my dad, I mean, there kind of wasn't really, I mean, the revival didn't exist. There wasn't, old cars weren't cool, really. They were for people that wore cagoules and bubble hats and, like talking about carburetors. But as the hobby has evolved, it is very much more a lifestyle orientated thing, and it's nice to see cars presented in an environment and in a way which they are intended to be used. So when and a car on its own doesn't necessarily do that, but when you have people and you see how people are interacting or enjoying the car, that's so much a part of what people want, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's also kind of the key to the future of the classic car world, because if you're not in the classic car world, the majority of the times you see a classic car tends to be when you've got some little doddery fella going on his Sunday morning drive in his Morris Minor, and you think, oh, that's nice, but you get stuck behind them at going 40 miles an hour, and you don't realise that you've got these incredible cars like a D-Type that can go 140 miles an hour and is still raced. And you just think, that's cool. Or, just some of these, like, wrote from, my life's a lot of Jaguars, a lot of E-Types. So, we're going at quickly on a road and overtaking, a little string of traffic. And you just think, if I was sat in that traffic and seeing that overtake, it might be the first time I've ever in my life experienced a classic car be able to actually be driven. And it is that lifestyle around and the stories around classic cars or cars in general, that I think is the way that people are buying into them. And I think it's always been a case to an extent, but more so now, especially, saying the good thing is social media. Now we can see the way that people are living with these cars. Like before, it might have only been in television and film. So we see James Bond with his DB5 and you think, I'll get a DB5 to feel like James Bond. Whereas now you can look at a wicked, I follow a girl on Instagram that's got an awesome truck. And I just think, she's not got loads of followers on Instagram, but I just think I would love to, that truck lifestyle looks like my kind of thing. So you end up getting inspired by normal people, everyday people that just are sharing their passion of their car. And it doesn't have to be something special, it doesn't have to be anything expensive. But as you said, it is that lifestyle and that kind of feeling that you're going to get if you were to drive that car as well. So yeah, I totally agree.
So let's go a little bit to your style, because, and as I say, I think that a lot of the time, at least, I could identify one of your pictures without knowing it was one of yours. If you go back to doing your wedding photography, was there were you approaching weddings in a I know that was very early on, so you were still sort of learning your craft, but I mean could I look at one of your wedding pictures from back then and look at one of your more recent car pictures and see a connection?
Absolutely. So the way that my image look in terms of their color grading and the editing is still very similar. I've tweaked it over the years just as I've changed what I like and the way that I think the images should look. But generally the way that I shoot and the kind of the baseline is still very similar. So I could still look at old wedding pictures and think, that still looks like my work. And it's quite nice to sometimes have a look through them and think, I still like I don't do weddings anymore, but over lockdown I did one panic wedding because I hadn't worked for ages, and I thought, oh, I need some money here, and it was quite nice to go back to it for once. I wouldn't do it all the time, but once, and I was like, oh, they still feel like my car photos, my old wedding photographs. So yeah, like styles, I think you have a style that is kind of sorry, this is my cat Moss. And so you have styles that you always kind of feel that are true to yourself, and then over years I think they are developed and changed, but not anything that's kind of a snap decision. And otherwise I don't know, when you start off doing anything, you do have those snap changes and thinking, oh, I definitely like that, I definitely don't like that. But kind of once you get settled into something, you don't tend to deviate from it too much, because you kind of feel I don't know, quite content in it, I guess. And if you're not feeling content in what you're producing, regardless of what medium that might be, I think you end up thinking, okay, well, why is that? And let me kind of alter that. Is it, as a writer, I imagine writers do the same. They're like, okay, why don't I like the way this has been written, or why doesn't it feel right? And over years, they might go, I quite like the, writing from this perspective, or including, I know, this kind of text writing. I'm not a writer, so you can tell I don't know. But I think it's definitely something that you kind of start off with a style, and it just ends up being tweaked over years rather than ever dramatically changing.
Yeah, and you mentioned, so I'm not very technical, but you mentioned color grading, and I think that's exactly some of your pictures. Actually, I saw one. I'm going to get this wrong now because I did see it on your website. It might be an E-type, and is there a train on a bridge?
It's a DBS Aston Martin, and it's a train. Yep, that's the one.
That actually looks like a painting. Do you find that sort of annoying if somebody says one of your pictures looks like a painting? Because I know,
no, I love it.
Yeah, no, but I think that. I mean, I think a lot of your work does, but that picture, I think in particular, looks like looks like a painting. I think it's an amazing piece of work.
Thank you. It was me and a team of people I was with for a watch company called Fairer that I'm an ambassador of, and we sat basically ready for this train to come over for an hour and a half. Somebody hadn't read the timetable properly, so we didn't know when it was going to come along. Anyway, then we knew it was getting nearer because some car decided to go and park right in the middle of the shot. So there's a video of the moment as well, so you can see the moment where the train's going over and the car's going under. And anyway, it was one of those where it just kind of was all flung together like in the last seconds of, because I had to run down this hill, say to this car, I'm really sorry, can you just move your car? And then I ran it back up the hill and I turned around and I was like, train! And then our driver then was like Le Mans start into the DBS, like boom, off he goes. And then the drone guy threw the drone up in the air, and it was manic. And then just got that shot basically. And it was just one of those where they got very, very drunk that night because they were like, we're done. We don't need to do any more. So, I think if we planned it better, we could have done a lot better. But I kind of like there's a whole kind of process of like a selection of those, that moment as it unfolds. And I quite like the whole set really. But sometimes you just get lucky. There's loads of times in my career and shots where I've just been at the, right place, right time, and I've just got lucky. And I've just thought I should probably lift my camera at this moment. And there's another shot where I got caught, my conversation with somebody got cut short because we got drowned out by this engine starting at Revival. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll see you later. And I kind of like walked around this corner just to see what the noise was going on. And all of these exhaust fumes and this real harsh diagonal shard of light just appeared. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And then, but if I hadn't been chatting to that person that I'd met a year before or whatever, you just would have totally missed it. And there were a load of other photographers around that got the shot as well. And but that's probably one of my favorite shots. But it's just kind of noticing and trying to just being ready to grab your camera. So
and so you go everywhere with a camera. Do you ever go out without a camera?
Oh yeah, like it's go to say Although what's funny, over COVID, I thought to myself, there's not really anything to shoot. Why don't I just start going? I don't think I ended up taking. I didn't take a big camera, but I'm always taking pictures, even with my phone as well, because my cameras they're not light things. They're quite big professional things with big heavy lenses, so they're not light. So, but I still enjoy the process of taking pictures. So I will often still take my phone out just to shove pictures up on Instagram stories of just things that I quite like. So, if I had taken a proper camera, then they would be a lot better in the terms of quality and just glass that's used. They'd be a lot nicer, but I've no need for them to be nicer. They're not going to go anywhere other than just satisfy my, I took a picture and I quite like it. So, but like we've just been on holiday this last weekend. I took a camera with me. We were doing some stupid things like playing golf around their garden and just taking pictures of that. I'm probably never going to show those pictures at all, but I quite like the process of taking them. Next week, we're going to again go to Scotland, like double holiday, with friends, and we're going to do a lot of hill walking. So I was like, right, I'm gonna take a camera, and I think that they might go stalking. So I'm like, right, it's not something I'm not going to do, but I think to document it is something I've never documented before. So I think it'd be quite interesting. So yeah, a whole world.
A lot of time crawling around on your stomach.
You do, yeah. So then I'm thinking, right, because genuinely, then I'm thinking, right, how am I going to do that with the camera? So I'll just shove it around. Yeah, it'll be fine. But again, I'm thinking, first of all, I'm going to be climbing about 4 Monroes. So I'm a bit worried about my general fitness. And then you kind of attach a 5-6 kilogram camera with a lens on it, and you think, this will be fine. So but
that is the problem, isn't it? I mean, I guess that's been the smartphone revolution, really, isn't it? Because I have got it's nothing to write home about. I have got a DSLR, and I've got my old 35mm film camera as well, and I don't use either of them. And I used to be quite enthusiastic about photography, but then when you go on holiday and you're walking around or you go down to the beach or whatever you're doing, you just don't want to carry. It's liberating not having like people did, pre-smartphones. If you people were walking around with all of this stuff hanging around their neck, and the cameras on iPhones, smartphones, a couple of pro photographers in the past have said to me, it's phenomenal what you can get with an iPhone. But I've got a question for you, because I think that this might interest listeners. So, and this sort of taps into what I was just saying, really, about iPhone. So a lot of us use Instagram. So you've got your iPhone and you take a photograph of something. You're at Goodwood Revival. And then, of course, you've got all of these amazing filters. And, and quite often it will turn a very average picture into something that you go, oh, quite like that. This is good. Quite proud of that, because technology is so clever now. How much of the finished article is in the quality of the photograph and your camera settings and everything else? And how much of it is in post-production? Is what you do on a laptop actually more important than what you're doing with your aperture settings and your shutter speed?
I think it depends on photographer to photographer. So if it came down to doing big commercial stuff, a lot of it, probably 70% is in the editing and making sure that everything looks incredible and it's all beautiful. For me, it's probably 70% in camera and 30% editing. And really 30% for me, it's just because it gives that like a spruce and it gives that emotion that I want to put into that picture. So if you think about film grading as well, if you have a film, if you watch, The Dark Knight and it hadn't got any editing on it, it would be a great film, but it would miss that emotion that, if you watched a film without music soundtrack, again, it'd be great, but you'd miss what it was trying to tell. So it's just this visual cue that actually kind of helps tell a story. So, look at Breaking Bad. There was Breaking Bad was a lot of yellow, and you just, or I think there's some yellow times and some blue times. It depends on what was going on in the TV show, and it's just these visual cues that make you feel something or kind of add to that emotion. So for me, my editing is all about adding to that emotion. So I might take a great shot in camera, or I might take a crap shot in camera, but I know that the moment was good. So I know that my editing can make it a great shot. So if I shot something that was perhaps slightly too underexposed and it was a bit too dark, but I looked at it, I thought, I know that that's going to come out and look really good and really moody. I definitely need that editing to help me out. So, when doing film, people would still do editing. They still do dodging and burning, and they would overexpose it or, expose it to the right level that they needed to. So editing has always been a thing. So it's just, I think it either enhances or just helps you get to that next 10% that you might want to bring your pictures to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I remember messing around. We had a dark room at school, and with all the chemicals and the the enlarger lamp and all the rest, and you could sort of mess around with all of that. And of course the other thing, which I'd kind of forgotten, but particularly I remember it particularly when I was using Ilford black and white film. Because you buy all the different film grades, don't you? So if you want grainy looking pictures, or you want and the different I forget. You're the expert, but it's the way that the way the film reacts to light, right? So you haven't got that component in a digital camera, have you?
You kind of do. So on a digital camera, you've got a sensor, and with your ISO, you can make it more sensitive or less sensitive. So the darker it is, you want to make your sensor more sensitive because you want to try and make it see as much as possible. But the payoff for that is that you'll get a very noisy picture. So which is kind of your grainy image, which is not necessarily a problem. But the main thing which we need to think about here is how people are consuming the photographs that you take. So as you said, if you're the majority of the photographs we now see generally are through our phones that are through a screen that's this big. They're not physically very big.
Yeah.
You see these amazing iPhone adverts where there's a massive billboard with it being like, this was shot on an iPhone 12 or whatever. But you're also standing quite far away and not stood in your living room with a picture on your wall or in a magazine. You can actually physically hold it closer to your face and think that's a great shot. The quality of that image is amazing. And I think that's a big difference that you see between like phone cameras, not all phone cameras, some are fantastic, and kind of the actual physical DSLR where you're looking through glass rather than a digitized little thing that puts on a fake blur in the background. That's not to say there's anything wrong with anything with phone photography as well. So, I follow some phone photographers because I admire what you can get with such little equipment. And I think people forget that as well. You either think, I don't have any equipment or I need to have all of the equipment, and there's a whole sliding scale in the middle. So it's I think it just depends on where you want your pictures to go afterwards. If you want to just have them for yourself, put them on your own Instagram, print them off in your own photo albums, or if you're shooting for a client where you think, this client needs quality because it's going to go wherever it's going to go to. So if you're shooting like a Ralph Lauren campaign or something,
all of us have untold thousands of digital images. Mm-hmm. They're either sitting on a hard drive or they're sitting in the cloud, and you kind of never go back and you never go back and look at them, and let alone take the effort to go and print them or make the effort to kind of enlarge them and frame them and hang them on your wall. And I think that's the nice thing still about print, and it's it's why I'm so pleased that print publications are still a thing, because it's the one opportunity where photography really has an opportunity to shine, isn't it? If you're talking about a double-page spread in a glossy magazine, arguably there's no better way to consume photography. I mean, a laptop screen is fine, but it's not quite the same as the way it's presented in print.
Yeah, like my favorite way to look at photography myself is literally the room that I'm in at the moment hasn't got a television because it's got a big coffee table. And the idea is that we wanted it to have a place that I've got so many photography books that I'm looking at, and to open a heavy photography book and actually just take your time to look at the images and appreciate them. And that rather than just having them flick through a reel on Instagram or whatever, just actually think what was going through the person who took that photograph's mind at the time, and what do they have to do to get there, or that read their write-up of what they said. I was doing this at this time when I took this picture, and that to me makes photography special and rewarding. But that's just how I like to consume photography. And for the majority of people who are not photographers, perhaps they might just go, I love looking at photographs on Instagram or Facebook, or I just want to see my pictures of my family. And I just think it's however you feel your most joy looking at photography is however choose the medium that works for you. I like to print some of my own personal family photographs and put them into a photo album, because as you said, otherwise they sit on your phone, you don't really ever look at them, which is the sad, really.
I've got some photograph albums at home, and some of them were my parents, their sort of childhood. But I don't think I've got a photograph album with a picture in it which probably dates beyond sometime in, I don't know, mid-late 90s. Anything since, as soon as we started photographing digitally, the kind of album stopped, which is a real shame.
Is it something you'd want to change? Do you reckon you'll...
Well, it is because when you are feeling a bit nostalgic, and I pick up a photograph, an album from the 70s or 80s when I was young, it's lovely to turn the pages and look at all those pictures that you haven't seen for a long time. And I just can't... the idea of wading through thousands on a hard drive, maybe I'll do it one day, but anyway.
Wade through a few thousand and then take your time, see what you come across first.
Yeah, I mean, especially, the thing is, you come across images that you took 10 years ago. You didn't even know you had them. That's the thing. But Amy, look, thank you. We've been talking for 50 minutes. So thank you ever so much for your time, and we'll keep an eye out. I don't know where we're next going to, what magazine or wherever we're going to see your work next, but I follow you on Instagram, and have you got any events, anything getting towards the end of the year now? We're doing this interview in, middle of November. Have you got anything coming up?
Not really. This is the point where we kind of all start to slow down a bit. So a lot of it is I go on my own holidays now. So I'm having my own kind of time off. I've got a few fun shoots, but they're more like kind of individual day things. And then after Christmas, usually the first thing that comes back around after kind of middle of November is Retromobile and some of the ice racing stuff. So that's going to be the very end of January. So like kind of November, December, January is my time where I just kind of, I look at all my photography books, I read books and I catch up with my emails because I'm months behind on emails sometimes. And then, just kind of have my own kind of time. So, or do my own trips. So my I did two kind of long solo road trips with my Mini, one around the North Coast 500 Scotland and one to the Shetland Islands and back again. And both of those I did in like Novembers because it's the only time you've kind of got to do them. And the light's beautiful and all the colours in Scotland are gorgeous. So it's the best time for road trips. So before the salt goes on the road at least.
Wow, and good luck with climbing the mountains in Scotland and your stalking. And it's been brilliant to chat. Thank you ever so much.
No, thank you so much.
Thanks, Amy.